I would like to welcome everyone who tuned in for Wise Women and Good Men. And we are into the second month of this year's focus, which is Leaders on Leadership. And I'm really thrilled because today we're focusing on the academics. So it's Leaders on Leadership academic focus. And there's two people who you'll be hearing from today, and I invited them both because of their backgrounds, their focus on leadership. The first one is Pete Giulioni. Pete has been a practitioner. In fact, when I met him, he had GA Enterprises, if you remember that, Pete Giulioni.
I
Um,
do. I do
I
indeed.
was in a big corporate position. I actually hired him to do some work with the group, which was very helpful, by the way. He then went on to really focus. He was in the Deloitte consulting group, and then he shifted to the USC School of Business.
Hmm.
And after that, taught at the, he's going to have to tell me again because it fell out of my head, Nanyang University in Singapore.
Not Nanyang University in Singapore. I spent 3 years there. Yeah.
And then he also SUNY in New York,
Hmm.
Albany.
Hmm.
And Sonya has got a very interesting background. She both received her PhD from Pepperdine. We were just conversing about the fact that on my notes I wrote Pepperdine and AI switched it to Paramount. And I'm thinking, I guess I was talking about Paramount Studios earlier in the week.
Hmm.
Um, but Pepperdine, and she's also a professor at Pepperdine as well as the University of Michigan. And she has a very interesting focus. Both her dissertation and the research that she's doing now has to do with the sociocultural impact of food and food systems. So she'll tell us more about that later. So, welcome, both of you. You truly are leaders on leadership. So let's take a deeper dive. Pete, why don't you start and then we'll go with Sonia. Tell us a little bit about your journey, how you
Mm.
kind of where you've been, where you are today. And we must say, very recently, Pete retired, which you can probably tell when you see his background. So take it away,
And
Pete.
my attire, yes.
Yes.
Okay. Hey, thank you so much, Diana, for having me. And Sonia, I really enjoy sharing this platform with you. Um, Gosh, it goes back to 1985 when I finished my MBA. Launched my own firm in change management and change management leadership. Practiced there for about 5 or 6 years. Grew that firm, and then was acquired by Deloitte Consulting. Deloitte at that time was trying to create a change management practice internally and became a direct admit partner, was there for about 10 years. Retired from there in 2004, went transition immediately to a leadership role at University of Southern California's Marshall School of Business at the graduate level. So I was doing an administrative dean role as well as doing some occasional teaching for electives. Retired there, and then was drawn into a role at Nanyang Business School. The former vice dean at USC became the dean of the Nanyang Business School in Singapore. Called me up one day, although he did have the good sense to call Julie, my wife, before he called me and said, "Julie, would you mind if he came to Singapore for a couple of years?" And she said, "Oh, sure." So I spent 3 years in Singapore, loved it. But the interesting thing for me, Sonia, and I know you appreciate this, is the change management thinking, the way we handle change management was predominantly U.S. or Western based. We extended to throughout North America and into Europe, but we didn't spend a lot of time in Asia testing some of the thinking associated with change management. I took that over and began teaching in Europe, pardon me, in Asia, and found out that throughout at least Southeast Asia, much of the thinking that we practice in change management in Western culture was quite applicable with some modifications, some change. At the end of that 3 year contract, came back to the U.S., decided to try to retire yet again. This is number four, just in case you were counting. And friends of ours, a former client at Southern California Edison, called me up and said, "Hey, Pete, what are you doing?" And I said, "Trying to stay out of my wife's hair." But he said, "Well, we're trying to start up an internal change management function leadership function here at Edison. Would you like to come in and become a part, help us launch that? I did that. I anticipated being there for a year, ended up being there 6, and last April, finally retired. And this April, it'll be 1 whole year that I've been retired. So this is a new goal, a new benefit for me. But Sonia, as you know, the students you have in the classroom continue to come back to you for mentoring. So I continue to be active in the leadership role. How do both men and women who I've taught, they come back to me and bounce ideas off me and talk to me about things, problems that they're facing. So anyway, that's the story, Diana. I love it, and I continue to mentor. I still have about 8 to 10 active mentees, and just enjoying all of the journey that we went through around leadership and change management from 1985 till last April.
And interestingly, when I left the practice of labor law or employment law, as we say today, my first corporate job and where I got my chops was at Southern California Edison Company. So I sort of began that aspect of my career there, and Pete ended his there, which is
Yep.
always thought a little interesting and ironic. So Sonya, tell us about your journey, please.
I would love to. Thank you, Diana, once again to you and your listeners for having me. I'm honored to share this platform. I'm in greatness. I'm in the presence of greatness with Pete and your colleagues. And again, I'm Sonya Sharififard, and I had the pleasure of serving at Pepperdine University and the University of Massachusetts Global, where I teach leadership, ethics, and social entrepreneurship. And I wasn't sure that I was going to lead up to higher education or research food insecurity. I was always interested in looking at entertainment, looking at literature, poetry. I thought I would be an author. I thought I would write books all the time. But I am a published author today and I have written books, but my journey was so different. So growing up, my parents are Iranian, they immigrated here in the 1980s, 1990s. They had me in New Jersey and I was born and raised there. And you always felt different. You always felt different because people didn't look like you, speak like you. When you would go to birthday parties, the atmosphere was different. Speaking the same language was not the same as speaking the same culture or understanding the same culture. And that went back to leadership when I was at school with, as Pete mentioned, leadership, mentorship, having great mentors to speak to me, see me for who I am. That inspired me. That sometimes at home or at school, you don't feel like you belong, but there are people there who can be your mentor, who can see the value in you and recognize the strengths that you bring to the table. And I was just so honored to have really great mentors, amazing faculty colleagues, teachers who believed in me and wanted to see me shine and wanted to see me thrive. And when I got to college, I went to FIDM, which is now ASU FITM, at the Herberger Institute at Arizona State University. I had great colleagues there as well, and the Alumni Association. So I'm really big on getting involved with your Alumni Association. And I always went to all the alum, even though I was a student, I went to the alumni events. And so I would ask alums, what
Interesting.
changes do you see in the department? What do you see in your organization that needs some improvement, or you would like to see some, changes made? And they would always point every single problem to leadership, whether it was hierarchical, organizational, social, perhaps political. It was always a leadership challenge. And that really interested me. And I was also at the same time serving as editor-in-chief of the school newspaper. And one day, our faculty advisor pulled myself and some staff aside and said, I just want you to know you're all doing a great job. I love how you lead this magazine. People are writing articles. It's great. But just one thing, everyone on the staff is working for free. They're volunteering their time, and some of them are food insecure. They don't really have a place to stay. They don't have a place to eat. They're skipping classes. They're skipping meals. What are you going to do about it? And at the time, I was shocked to hear that I was a sophomore in college, and I thought perhaps there's a counselor or a dean of student affairs or somebody who could assist the students. What can we possibly do? And then I stopped for a week and I thought about that issue, and I thought, my faculty advisor's right. I'm editor in chief. I'm by default the leader of this group. And so, of course, I should care about the people I'm working with and my colleagues who are in the same level of education as I am. But if they're experiencing food insecurity, that also becomes my problem. That also becomes my challenge. And if you're hungry, you can't perform at your best. So I need to respect that and honor that and help support you however I can, however is appropriate. So I stuck with that. And I had great mentors in my master's degree leading on to my PhD. And I just thought, I'm going to study food insecurity. I'm going to look at food pantries. I'm going to look at how nutrition impacts us and public health concerns. And so for the last 10 to 12 years, that has been my purpose, is to be a leader in higher education, but also in the food system space, to see how we acquire food, how we prepare food, how we handle it. And if we're having an event on campus or in a business setting, how do we cater the food? And how do we present that food? And is where we are, where we belong. So that's a little bit about me, and I'm really honored to serve. I love where I am and the people that I work with. So thank you.
Wow,
Wow.
Sonya, that is so
Wow.
powerful.
Yeah.
Amazing. And I love these conversations because as an advocate and dedicated person to lifelong learning, I thought that comment about you focusing on alumni associations when you were a student, that's amazing. I don't know where
Mm.
that came from. It's the first time I've ever heard it, but boy, we're going to pass that one along.
Mm.
And the food insecurity, that just brought me to, I have three children. My youngest went to PCC, Pasadena City College, before transferring to UCLA, go Bruins. And I was president of Pasadena Rotary at the time, and she became president of the Rotary group at PCC, and was shocked to find out that some of the students were also food insecure. So we did some targeted programs through Rotary on that. So
Mm.
anyway, Pete, you first,
Interesting.
and then Sonya.
Sure.
If there are people out there who are thinking, should I get a PhD? And if I get a PhD, what
Yeah.
will I be doing with it? Sort of, what do you see as the pros and cons in terms of a relationship between achieving or attaining a PhD and then work they might do?
Yeah. And I'm embarrassed and humbled in front of Sonia when I say this. When I got, I never really considered a PhD, Sonia, until I left consulting and went into academia. And I had a blessing when I was at USC, and one of my I would have, yeah, I'll call him a mentor, maybe a minor mentor. There was a guy named Warren Bennis, and I'm sure that anybody in leadership has heard of Warren. He's passed away now, but Warren Bennis was in residence at USC, and I sat down one day and we were having coffee. I said, "Hey, Warren, should I get a PhD?" And he looked at me. At the time, I was about 55, 56 years old, and he said, "Why? What are you going to do with it?" So, Diana, as a really direct response to your question, I think, like you, I'm a lifelong learner. But what are we going to do with the PhD? How are you going to bring value to your life, to the people around you? And in that case, I really took Warren's counsel to heart. There was nothing I would do more, better, different with a PhD than I wouldn't without the PhD. So with that, I made the decision just to continue to move forward, but to encourage the young people that came into my orbit who were considering to get a PhD, to go through that thought process and to make
Mhm.
good decisions. So that's it.
Oh, that's interesting. So, one of the reasons I ask is our lead off conversation was with Dr. Sarah Smith Orr, and I think Sarah was maybe she was even in her 60s when she got her PhD,
Mm,
possibly. Of course, at this point, it's hard to recall, but she at least was in her 50s, and that was a focus. And she also told me she went to Claremont Colleges. She went through the
mm,
School of Education,
hmm
as opposed to kind of their leadership program. And her focus then became education on
hmm
leadership. And she, by the way, I met Sonia through Sarah because
mm,
they're in some leadership organizations, and Sarah has been her mentor as well.
mm.
So, Sonia, same question to you. If somebody came to you and said, why should I get a PhD? What does it mean for job, future? What do I do with it? We heard very lucky to have had Warren Bennis, by the way, as a mentor, someone who had
Mm.
a conversation with you. Sonia, what advice would you give? Because I'm sure there are people listening who are considering a PhD in the entirety of the leadership realm.
Absolutely. I would say investing in yourself, investing in higher education is always valuable.
Mm,
But as Pete mentioned, asking yourself, well, why? What is my purpose? Is it for surface? Is it for advancement in the organization? Is it because I really love to do research or I love to read and I really want to challenge myself and acquire more knowledge? With the advancement of technology and AI growth accelerating, acquiring knowledge
Mm,
is sometimes we take that for granted. So what would an investment in research add to what you can already access? What is
hmm
attainable? So thinking about research labs, venture studios like
hmm
ASU has, facilities that can support your research are really important. So I would say talk to the Alumni Association. That's the first thing. Speak to recently graduated alums, and then speak to the think tank organizations and the research centers at the universities where we're thinking of applying to see what research is produced, how often they publish, do they go to
hmm
conferences, what
hmm
associations are they familiar with, just like my mentor, Dr. Smith Orr. That's how we met and collaborated. So it's important to, one, love the institution, love the discipline you're studying, but also think at the opportunities that will exist. If a lot of my students are consultants, they're project managements, they're
mm,
also in law enforcement. I have a very diverse group of students. So I
mm,
always ask at the end of the day, do you want to come back and teach, or do you want to be a better leader at your organization? That's what you need to ask. And the important thing about a PhD or an EDD, because we have so many doctoral degrees today, is to think of yourself as a contributor of knowledge, not just a consumer of knowledge. You might have acquired knowledge in undergrad, or you might have acquired knowledge during your high school days, but now you're actually contributing to knowledge. So you're picking up the pieces from where previous scholars published, and you're
hmm
looking at their conclusions and making up your own recommendations and leading the page forward. And they're going to be citing you. So, what knowledge will you be contributing to your discipline? And how will people cite you? And how will they think about your work in scholarship? So, again, I absolutely think it's a wonderful investment. But again, think about the organizations that have these programs and these higher education institutes that could have research centers devoted to what you want to actually study.
All right.
mm.
Well said,
Interesting.
Sonia. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I like both of your focus areas of focus on it. You know, actually, I got at UCLA my undergraduate degree in history, and I considered getting a PhD in history and really wanted to move on and become a professor. And for some um, frankly, reasons due to the fact that I would have been the only female, and I had some advice from a professor that was more typical in those days, shall we say, than it is today. Specifically, Diana, you'd have to be smarter than all the boys, which you're not, or have a special relationship with a professor. And I knew exactly what that meant. Thankfully, and hopefully, that doesn't happen today. So I went to law school instead, but I enjoy, and I suppose as a leadership consultant, there's a fair amount of education that goes on. I enjoy learning and I enjoy sharing that knowledge. So, speaking of leadership, and let's start with Sonya and then we'll have
Okay.
Pete add to it. What would you say are the 3 to 5, and maybe it's not that many, top leadership skills that you embrace that you think others need to have to prepare themselves for the 21st century and AI and all the other um, things that we don't even know about that are going to take place?
Mm,
Wow,
So,
that's such a thoughtful question. Really thoughtful question. I appreciate that. There's so many qualities that make up a good leader and an effective leader. So I think the context is really important of where you work. Some high level, intense jobs with STEM backgrounds might require different skill sets than the academy would. But I would say generally being a thoughtful, effective leader who cares about people, cares about the organization, also cares about the mission of where they're serving would have to be authentic, a dedication to human capacity building, and
mhm,
articulating a good sense of self. People have to trust you. So if they trust you, that's a big level of accountability. To whom are you accountable? When you read articles and that article is part of what you're going to be doing for making decisions or strategic leadership, who are you accountable to then? Is it a publisher? Is it the organization, or is it the people? And what about your stakeholders, the people, your clients, your customers, the consumers that you serve, and those who are not yet your stakeholders, but who will become soon enough? So being accountable, being articulate, having human capacity building, and with respect to AI and technology, a willingness to embrace learning. Again, back to our conversation starter about lifelong learning. You have to
mhm,
learn. Even once you have doctor at the beginning of your name, you still have to learn. You have to do research. You have to publish often. It's publish or perish. So learning doesn't begin in the classroom. We continue to learn. We continue to read. We speak on panels. We present. We're keynote speakers. We do TED Talks. So you're always learning. What you acquired in the classroom is just a small piece of who you'll become afterward. And even in the organization, whether it's through professional development or team building, retreats, those are all small activities that help elevate the culture and the organization's mission. So think about how you have the capacity to build humans, build trust, and also build culture. We think of culture as getting
Yeah.
along, going along to get along, but culture means that you show up as your full self, that who you are is embraced on a personal level and a professional level. And that's really important as well because culture, AI can tell you how to build culture, but it's the human aspect of I see you, I hear you, I respect that, I honor that. And that goes on to the equation, I believe, of great accountability as well.
Wow. Powerful stuff, Sonya. Pete, what would you add to the list?
Wow. It's hard to find anything to add after that, Sonia. As you were speaking, I was thinking, yes, and I it is a responsibility of leaders to exhibit everything you just said. Okay. And don't underestimate your power of teaching simply by performing those activities in a responsible way, in a consistent way, and not in a braggadocious way, but just doing it. And the young people, I continue to be stunned by the number of people who say, "I saw you do something, and I realized it was important." And I didn't even realize that I was doing it, to be honest with you. But as a leader, you have a responsibility to behave and act in a way that you want the people around you to emulate. And I see leaders who have forgotten that. I see
Hmm.
leaders who are in it for their own ego or for their own enrichment, and I find that repugnant. And not to get political, but if you think about some of the things that are causing us the most tension today, that is the fact that we have leaders who are behaving in a way that we wouldn't want our children to behave.
Yeah. I mean, wow. It's what's sprang into my, or sprang, I guess, sprung, what came into my little pea brain was it's not what you say, it's what you do.
Yeah.
And so many leaders will intone something. And I've worked for some of them in my corporate career, but
Mhm.
they act in completely opposite ways. And then they're shocked that people don't want to follow them.
I've done the same thing, Diana. I can't tell you how much I used to talk to the people who worked fit with me and for me about work-life balance, and then I work 80 hours a week. That is not behaving in a way and or if you th and then rewarding someone else who did it. And it's like, oh, come on. How
Yeah.
counterproductive is that? Yeah. Mm. So
Boy, you said a couple of other things that the ping pong effect of a conversation, and these truly are conversations. Used to do a lot of volunteer work for the Center for Nonprofit Management when it was a certain leadership cadre who I knew well, and then of course it's morphed over time. And I remember saying one day to the woman who would assign me or ask me to participate, I'd say, we were just having a conversation. I said, one of the things that's a little bit frustrating about consulting is that you never really know what the impact is. And I swear I must have put that out into the universe because that following week, three different things happened. First, she said to me, "Oh, Diana, so and so just called me yesterday to say that the training that you gave them on, and it really was on speaking up to the boss, essentially, had kind of changed her work life situation." Then my children and I were out to dinner, and we walked by a table, and this woman jumps up and she said, "Diana, Diana, I want you to meet my mother." And she had been in a training or a facilitation. I walk over and I mean, this is rather shocking. She goes, "Mom, this is the woman who changed my life." And I'm, of course, very proud because my three children are there and they're hearing this. And I'm thinking, what in the heck did I do? And it was kind of, one of those throwaway comments. We were being
all right.
strategic. And I just asked everybody in this particular facilitation, where do you want to be in 3 to 5 years? Didn't think much of it. And she said that caused her to rethink where she was and to change direction. And I thought, wow, that was kind of powerful stuff. So then I've started to view it that you've got that placid mill pond, and then you kind of toss a little pebble, and then there's the concentric circles that go out.
Right.
So I don't know. It's just, it's gratifying because the kind of consulting I do doesn't, sorry, that's my dog and a pet toy back there, a little lambykins he's eating. It's just sometimes you just really don't know what that impact is. But then I stop and think about the training I went through. And I know people said things to me that were life-changing. And did I ever tell them that? And the likelihood is no. And then the other thing you said, because I made a lot of mistakes as a first-time manager at Southern California Edison Company. So when I start a training, which I really call a facilitation, because to me, it's not me, it's not Moses handing down the 10 Commandments. It's pulling the information out of people. But I will often say, either when I start a coaching assignment or training, I'll say, I made a lot of mistakes. The good news is I learned from those mistakes. The better news is I'm willing to share those mistakes with you so you won't make them. So I went through the school of hard knocks and am very appreciative of first-time supervisors, managers.
What? Yeah.
Sorry
So
for that
Sonya, I do have a
repetition.
PhD in hard knocks. There you go.
Well, I'm going to toss this in. It really wasn't on. We kind of chatted about what we might be discussing, but Sonya, your work is so fascinating. How can people learn more about it, and where what I understand the studies generically, kind of the socio-cultural, economic, impact of food, but are you willing to share some of what you're diving into, what you're finding, and what publications and how people might access them?
Absolutely. Thank you very much. When we think of food insecurity, we often might think of perhaps poverty, low socioeconomic status, just starvation and hunger. Those are the generic terms that we see and we hear of. But food insecurity is also social exclusion. It's about access, distribution, logistics, and safety. A lot of individuals who come to college had, respective privileged backgrounds or well-off backgrounds, but they come to college and they're food insecure and they don't know where their next meal is going to come from, right? Because the food they're used to eating at home is not aligned with what they're seeing on college dining facilities. Their food environment, they don't have a car. They can't access the nearest grocer, or a grocer is 10 miles away. So what's closest to them is perhaps a liquor store, a convenience store, a store that does not have food that's going to, help keep you full for a day. Or they rely on a food pantry, and the food pantry has Jello, pudding, some high fat food, high corn syrup, and that's going to make you more hungry. So perpetuating the cycle of food insecurity. So even I've worked with faculty, staff, deans, and administrators. They're even food insecure. They have full-time careers. They are leaders. They're leading others, but they have personal challenges dealing with nutrition security, public health, and food insecurity for over 5 periods of time. So it's a persistent issue that doesn't affect just one person or one individual. It's a community that's experiencing it. And here in LA County, 1 in every 4 households is either high to very high food insecure, which means they're skipping 3 times, having 3 meals a day, or the mom and dad won't eat to ensure that the child is eating, or that students will have to take a leave of absence, or they'll have to accumulate more jobs, full-time or part-time, to make ends meet. So it's a huge barrier. And I think it's important that when you go to an event and food is served, think about where that food really came from. It'll be awkward to ask around. We don't speak about that. We don't want to kill off the vibes, but we want to be there to serve and appreciate. But it is important, if you're a host especially, to think of my RSVP. Did I ask about dietary restrictions? Did I ask about what my guest will be comfortable with eating? Because I have a student at orientation week just this past year, and she actually, in her survey, she told us what she can and cannot consume. And unfortunately, we didn't have that we couldn't facilitate that because we just didn't have the resources. And then I thought that's a cultural issue, and we need to be more responsible,
Hmm.
and we need to take that into account. And even before we work with admissions, asking these questions in a respectful, ethical, legal way is this is a community. And when we bring students on, how do we ensure that they're going to feel a part of our community? If they can't access the dining hall, will there be another dining facility available for them? If we have orientation week or if we have dinner for first year students, will they feel included? Because I have students who can't have that food, and instead of having the social hour, meeting the professors, getting the research credits and networking, they have to go find food an hour away, or they have to call Uber Eats. That's the reality that we see today. Even at work, you have new employees who have their dream jobs, but they don't feel that they're part of the culture because the way that they socialize after work or socialize during work meetings is just not compatible with their personal lifestyle. So we have to be really mindful about food is a conversation starter and being able to respect that. And so with colleagues at Arizona State with the Difference Engine, I'm actually working on a biodigester and a meal toolkit to help organizations, colleges, and universities be able to adapt that into their current models to prevent food waste and help create an abundance of food where people don't feel excluded and they feel that they have access to resources that they need.
You know, Sonia,
Wow.
that's amazing stuff. You are on LinkedIn. Is there
I
some
am.
way that you could, and I must confess I haven't read it entirely, but I read the face page and what your posts were recently. If there's something that you could do that could direct those of us who are interested in learning more, when you say 25% in LA County is food insecure, that's amazing. And
It is. And so much of food goes to waste every single year. And
yes,
that's good quality food. That should not. So it's a matter of distribution and access.
yeah, well, part of that's also the laws that we have because I've gone to events where there's extra food, and if that extra food isn't um, properly contained, shall we
Right.
say,
Yes.
I was on the board of Union Station Homeless Services for a long time, and we could
Right.
always donate food there, but
Right.
now you can't. And Union Station does the Thanksgiving and Christmas in the park, and we used to line up in our cars and donate food. Can't do that anymore. So, then it becomes, I noticed this year what they were asking for, it's like canned yams as opposed to fresh yams.
Yeah.
So there's
Yes.
also, understandably, there are health considerations about food distribution, but it just seems to me there's a better way. So,
Mm.
Pete, the question I'm going to throw at you that we didn't really talk about, but you brought up in your conversation about change management, not really
Mm.
studying the Asian culture. So tell
Right.
us a little bit more about that. And would that impact some of the Asian, there's a lot of recent Asian migration to the
Hmm.
LA County area. If you look at the
Hmm.
census and in our own specific area, which is kind
Right.
of San Gabriel Valley, West San
Sure.
Gabriel Valley. So talk a little bit about that. I found that fascinating.
Well, I'm sure Sonia can relate to this. One of the things that I have discovered when I went to Nanyang University in Singapore, if you don't know where Singapore is, and most Americans are horrible in geography, it is this little tiny island at the tip of Indonesia. But fortunately, because of the location, it has Chinese influence, Indonesian influence, Filipino, Indian influence. This is a really truly a melting pot of cultures. So I had the opportunity to go there and talk about this concept called change management. How do you manage during periods of change, be it organizational change, be it it could be political change, it could be even something just personal change. How do you manage that your reaction and manage yourself through the change successfully? And there are a couple of things that we in the U.S. and we in Western cultures take for granted. I mean, one of the things that Diana, you and I've talked about many times is how do you manage your manager? That was big in the 90s and the early 2000s, managing your manager. And it not being manipulative, but truly managing the relationship with your manager. You bring that up in a classroom in Singapore, and these poor kids enormous, incredibly bright young people look at you like you have three heads. The thought, culturally, the thought of managing a senior or managing someone older than them
Mm,
or
mm,
managing their manager, culturally, that is just, they, I don't know if it's um, they've never thought of it, or it's something that is just an anathema to them. So just things that you and I may have taken for granted in terms of creating this strategy around change management had to be adapted, and adopted and modified. So there are a number of things, stakeholder engagement, the idea of taking a look at stakeholders and assessing what their level of receptivity to the change would be. For a someone in the Asian culture, for me to impose my own criteria for acceptance on you is truly rude in their culture. So
mhm.
if they would say, now how will Sonya react to this? That is a rude behavior. So those kinds of
Mm.
things had to be modified as I was teaching change management in that space. So it was a lot of fun. It truly, you talk about something that created the elasticity, or pardon me, that challenged the elasticity in the way I think about things. That was in my late 60s. I was doing that, and I had spent 30 years creating this understanding of change management and the strategies around change management, but only in Western cultures. So I believe everybody should just at some time in their career, sometime really, just pick themselves up and plop them in a whole different culture because that will really test your own resiliency. So I may have gone in a direction you didn't want to go. I'm sorry, Diana.
No,
But for
it's fine.
me, those are the things I discovered. And I mentioned I still have counselees or mentees. Four of my eight mentees I have to are still in Asia. Well, one's in
Mm,
India, one's in
yeah.
Australia, one's in two are in Singapore. So I continue to I touch their thinking, touch the way they understand their world, and we continue to talk about it.
That's fascinating. And I don't know. And this happens to me. All of a sudden, someone says something, and it's like ping pong, and ping. So, Dr. Sarah Smith Orr, who was our lead leader on leadership, guest and conversationalist, she was doing a class called Crisis Leadership at UCLA Extension, and she would
Hmm.
have me. And I was very proud that both of my books were part of the bibliography and required reading. But she would have me come talk about conflict management,
Hmm.
and all of this was online because it started during COVID, but it also allowed for international students.
Hmm.
And it was very interesting to discuss conflict management and the way that I would go about it, primarily because of what you said about the difficulty in challenging someone who's older than you are. And of course, now that I'm older, I love that one. But when you have children challenging you,
I'm
and
wondering why it doesn't still apply now that I'm older. You
right,
know,
right, right, right. But it was really fascinating how you get around that. How can you respect somebody?
right,
And it's kind of goes back to one of the Zinger Miller principles from my standpoint.
right.
Focus on the issue, situation, and I've changed it to conduct rather than behavior because of my legal training,
Hmm.
as opposed to the person. So you can respect the person, and what you're talking about is what that person did or didn't do.
Hmm.
Um, it's hard at the beginning when I found when one was trying to I was trying to implement that principle, but over the years, it's become kind of second nature to separate out the personal from, I really say personal from professional, but it's personal from conduct.
Hmm.
But oh, I bet that was really interesting. And yeah, I
Yeah.
could see that because I know you were there for 3 years because I know you
Yeah.
went back and
And
forth.
And
And
I was really blessed because I lived on campus, so I truly did immer. Julie didn't come. My wife didn't come with me because our youngest daughter was still in high school. So I was there and I lived on campus. So there were
gosh,
days, there were weeks when I was the only non-Asian that I even saw or that.
Hmm.
So I was truly immersed in the culture, and it was so much fun. It was a wonderful growth experience. Yeah.
Well, you got to experience what it was like to be in the minority. And
Yes.
I think that I did it when I was at Times Mirror. I did a nationwide diversity task force. And one of the things we did, which was so simple, and it wasn't an idea I invented, I read it in an article, but have all of the senior officers join a nonprofit in which they were in the minority.
Mhm.
It is such a powerful experience and very
Mhm.
important for they were all white male leaders at the time. So they all joined organizations in which they were in the minority, whether it was race, religion, color, creed, etc.
Mhm.
So the reason I like these conversations is because they become conversations, but we're coming to the end, but we have it's 10:40 and we do finalize things within the 5 minutes. But very briefly, if each of you could think of something that I didn't ask you that you wanted to
Mhm.
discuss. So maybe Pete, if you could do a be brief, be brilliant, be gone, and then we'll have Sonya.
Okay. Mine is easy because I knew you were going to ask that question. I find that each of us needs to search for something that we do outside of our work
Mm,
life and share it. It could be a coach, nonprofit organizations. Sonia, your passion around food security. I find that fascinating. Okay. If I was sitting next to you on an airplane flying to New York, we could talk the whole way because I find that fascinating. What is it about you as a leader that if you shared it with folks, they would find it fascinating about you? I do a lot of nonprofit work. I do a lot of volunteer work. I do a lot of board work. And it's because I really love um, giving back.
thank you. Sonya, how about you?
I agree with Pete is that know who you are, know your purpose, but also partner with and for your community. Oftentimes we have a passion, but we don't know that there's mentors just down the street from you. So know your neighbors, know who are the retailers and the environment that's around you, the institutions, the anchor development areas. What is around you, and how are you a partner in your community? Again, I always say is where you are, who you are. Why did you
Mm,
choose to invest in this
Mm,
community? How do you invest in this community? And do you give back? So for me, I'm involved in Pasadena Rotary, and I'm also involved in many organizations where I live in downtown LA and the Alumni Association. So always find a way to give back that's making you contribute and add value, but don't just give insights and give leadership, but also provide leadership in conjunction with each other for a greater purpose and a greater mission.
right. And
That's what I
and
would.
share it with people, Sonia. I
Yeah,
mean, my
yeah,
goodness, that's part of that leading by example. Okay. Share it with
exactly,
people. Yeah.
exactly.
yes, and in the interest of full disclosure, obviously I know both of my guests today. Sonya, I met through Pasadena Rotary and through Dr. Sarah Smith Orr. And Pete, I met when I hired him when he was part of GA Enterprises to come help facilitate a group. It was very fascinating. I had come from Southern California Edison Company, ended up as HR head at the enterprise level of the Times Mirror Company, which no longer exists, and didn't appreciate until after the fact that I was truly an outsider, that among the 26 or 27 companies, there were HR heads who had wanted the job, and the staff that reported to me wanted them, did not
Mhm.
want me. So it was one of those painful learning experiences, and
Right.
Pete really did the first facilitation and did a great job at it.
Yeah. And you know that was 35 years ago, right, Diana?
Yes, that was 35 years ago. Um, but one of the things that Pete, I don't know if you remember this, but I had a tendency to speak in absolutist language. So I would say the perfect example. And Pete said, well, when you say the perfect example, then everyone else thinks theirs example is, kind of crummy. So I had a boss who communicated in a very different style, shall we say. And Pete said to me, don't ask W questions like why, when, because for whatever reason, that person almost felt assaulted, like I was putting him on the defensive. He said, start asking like, how? And I'm thinking to myself, oh, this is a bunch of bunk, but I did it anyway. Instead of saying, what do you think? I'd say, well, how might blah, blah, blah happen if I did this? So I made it into a game, truly, but it worked. Anyhow, I want to thank so much Sonya and Pete for this amazing conversation. Sonya's on LinkedIn. Pete, are you on LinkedIn?
I
Okay,
am. Yeah.
Pete Giulioni
Mhm.
and Sonya, and I'm going to botch it. So I think it's Sharififard.
Yes.
Yay, I got it. Are on LinkedIn, as am I, and you can reach out to them. I'm truly excited for this year on Leaders on Leadership. We started with Dr. Sarah Smith-Orr, who's done it all. Today's focus was on academia. And the next two sessions are focused on leaders, people who have led large organizations and lessons learned. And we will be posting that soon, trying to finalize the details. But thank you. And for those who missed, or you know of somebody who should hear this, the amazing Jennifer Coleman, with whom we work, will upload this to my YouTube channel later today and possibly edit some of it. And so I think our time is up, and I want to thank our guests again. And great conversation. We've got to keep it going, which I think we will. I have a feeling that at least Pete and Diana are interested in your food insecurity and would love to learn more about it.
Yeah.
So thank you, one and all. And remember, we are the third Tuesday of each month at 10 a.m. Pacific time. Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you
you,
so
Diana.
much. It was a
And
pleasure.
nice meeting
Thank
you, Sonya. Really was.
Nice meeting you too. A pleasure.
Take care.
Thank you. Have a great
Yeah.
day.
Thank
You
you.
too.
Bye now.
Bye now.